I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Chair Blackwell,
Here.
Member Matheny,
Here.
Member Irvin,
Here.
Member Askew,
Here.
Member Trace, absent. Vice Chair Davis,
Here.
Member Loden,
Here.
First of all, we have the minutes from the December the 2nd, 2021 meeting minutes. Has anyone had any questions or concerns about those minutes? Any corrections?
If not, I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a
Second.
motion from Councilmember or Member Davis and a second from Member Matheny. Did I hear them down there?
Yes.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any disapprove? And it so carries. At this point, I'm going to recognize Member Matheny, who has some presentations to make.
Hello. It's very odd to be on this side of the, of the podium. But tonight we have time to reflect back on the past year and show our appreciation to Member Loading and Vice Chair Davis for their wonderful service to the community. I, for one, know that I really enjoy you guys being up here with us, and I appreciate your counsel on our items as well. So we have some small gifts to give you as a small token of our appreciation for all that you do for the city. I guess I'm going to hand them to you behind the screen.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Anything else this year?
Nope.
Yeah.
Yours is on your desk.
Oh, really?
We are indeed extremely grateful for the contributions from Member Davis and Member Loading, and thank you for your time and your gifts that you have invested on this committee. With that, we come to new business and the presentation of a strategic five-year financing and implementation plan by RMA.
Good evening, Antoinette Forbes, Economic Development Manager. So this evening we are bringing back RMA, Redevelopment Management Associates. They are the consultant that we hired to help us with our five-year plan. As you recall, we wanted to create a plan that as we go forward with whether it's property acquisition or just major projects, we're doing it in a way that is strategic and in a way that not only the CRA but our citizens, our constituents understand how we are spending CRA funds. So the last meeting I said that we would be back with that five-year plan. We are now back. It has been reviewed by our Economic Development Advisory Committee. It's also been reviewed by our Finance Director as well. And with that, I'm going to present Ms. Kim Briesmeister, yes, to present the five-year plan.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. It's great to see all of you again, and thank you for the introduction.
Could you share your name, please?
I'm sorry,
Once again, for the record.
Kim Briesmeister. I'm a principal with RMA, Redevelopment Management Associates.
Thank you.
As Antoinette said, tonight we're going to talk about your strategic finance implementation plan. But what I would like to suggest is that we have a little bit deeper dialogue, and not lengthy, but deeper, because we want to make sure that as you start implementation of this plan, that you're comfortable with the concepts behind it and really how those three things fit together. The strategic part of it really came from our last meeting and all of the reviews of the work you've done to date, the direction the city's going in, and not duplicating, but taking those strategies and putting them into a format that can be followed, that are clear, concise, and that they're extended over a period of time. The finance port is vitally important. Like with anything, if the private sector is going to come invest in your city, they need to look at the government and say, do they have a financial plan to hold up the public side of what they're going to do in their city? And then the last part is the implementation. What this plan does is it lays it out so succinctly over periods of time for you as the board and as the city commission to track it monthly to see whether or not you're on schedule. So I'm going to go through this relatively quickly, but I would like to make sure that, unlike last time where I was presenting the concept of this plan, get into some specifics for St. Cloud and things that you might consider as you go into the actual implementation. I'm going to do the initial discussion, especially the part where we're going to discuss land acquisition and real estate. We're going to get a little into the weeds, but this is the bulk of really, I think, where you stand to have the most activity. And really, this is where your economic growth is going to come from. And then Adrian Esteban, who's been working with your staff for the last 7-8 months, Adrian will come up and do the rest of the presentation. So I just reviewed really what this plan is about. The last time we were here was in July. I think at that point had wonderful dialogue with you all about the concept. You're obviously, as a board, very proactive. You're trying to create a plan that has not only transparency, but now you have a structure so that you can go out to the private sector and let them know what St. Cloud's plans are for development, and you can become that public partner in public-private partnerships. The plan for St. Cloud is broken into specific categories. The private sector likes certainty. They want to know what's your plan, when are you going to do it, and how are you going to do it. So we broke it down into these categories again, largely following your lead of where you in the past have gone, but also your directives of where you want to go. The project areas are not new. We discussed these last time. These are your areas of focus, but we may have, again, identified real specific activities within those areas that we would like to focus on. So we've organized it geographically, and we've organized it by activity. Also, not just in your redevelopment district, when there's an asset or assets that a city has outside of a targeted redevelopment area, we grab it. We want to make sure that as you grow and as the private sector gets interest in you, they also recognize that you as a city as a whole might be focused on a redevelopment area, but you have got other assets, in particular maybe a waterfront, it could be a Main Street, it could be an industrial area, it could be your medical industry. Whatever it is, we want to track that. We want to feed off of it. And it can be either for job growth, it can be for investment, or some other purpose. So again, I'm not going to delve really deep into that, but I think that that concept's clear. So I'm going to walk you through the land acquisition and the public-private partnership part of the role that you could play. And I really want to spend enough time on it to make sure that we talk through what that means in terms of some decisions that you might make in the future and what that might look like. Last time I was here in July, we used another city as a case study. We're going to use the same city, but the topic and the dialogue will be a little bit deeper. Of all of the cities that we have helped and worked with through the last 3 decades, the ones that master this are the ones that have the most economic growth. So what you're looking at is the map that we got from the city, and this, again, we showed this last time, where you've already assembled land, it's already in your target area, you already have some preliminary plans for it, but now what? So let's talk about what that might look like. You already have a master plan. The document on the left is from your coffers. You have massing, you have an analysis, you have an idea of what you want it to look like. You have some renderings, et cetera. But now the private sector is going to say, okay, well, what? What are you going to do with it? Now let's talk about that one example and the next steps for you to go from where you're at now of owning land to actually getting something built. In this case, this was a 5-acre piece of land, had problem properties on it, a library, fire station, et cetera. The city wanted to develop it, and they were in the same spot as you were. The first step, and you're there, you're in the draft form of an RFP. You're about to go out and invite the development community to come to you and say you are interested in having them build something in your downtown. The document itself is vital. It not only has to be accurate, it has to be analyzed enough that you're telling the private sector and speaking their language, which is real estate development. You need to already understand what it is that you want, but you have to know that it's feasible as well. That document is extremely important. The second part is when they respond. Are they going to respond to you in a way that you can measure it, that you're sure you're going to be able to get what you want? So let's talk about these three things in particular. In the case study that I shared with you back in July, we talked about that vacant lot that I just showed you. You also have a parking garage that you want to include in this discussion. It isn't enough to just put the parking garage out there. In general, parking garages tend not to make money. They just don't cash flow real well. That said, you're the government, you need to provide public parking. So there's quandary number one. How do you invite the private sector in? How do you provide public parking? And how do you get that to cash flow? Tonight, we're not building the watch. We're just going to talk about what time it is, and we're going to talk about those elements that you need to think about to end up in that RFP document. Those little red dots on that picture to the right, those were the actual projects within that site plan that were going to generate revenue. So the second section where it says rent revenue from the pier, we already had a pretty good idea how much development square footage was viable because of market analysis. We already had a pretty good idea how much rent revenue was going to be generated. So we knew how much money we were going to be able to collect, and we knew how much that was going to translate into usage of that garage. So those first two bullets and those tied over to the actual vertical construction are part of your analysis now. It's going to be important as you do your land acquisition that you structure it in a way that you are speaking to the private sector again in their language. It's been highly, highly successful. We were very fortunate to get a good development partner who came in. I think Adrian, who manages this project, is on amendment number 8, because as good as you might write the RFP and get a private partner and enter into a legal agreement to build this, you're not going to think of everything, and things are going to come up. The market will change. So the activity that you're going to engage in this land acquisition development, it's not only the most exciting thing that you'll do, it's not only the most economically effective thing you'll do, but it's real important when you get that partnership that you're able to build that kind of development that you too would look and say, okay, we not only put the process together, we got the private investment, and then it was developed the way that we envisioned it. So again, I'm trying to just take this few minutes up front, and the rest of the summary will not be this in-depth, is to really share that with you, that as you go through your land acquisition and development phase, take your time, take the process in depth enough that you can analyze it, and then you will be, I believe, very successful. You have all the pieces to do it, and you have very, I think, in-depth discussions, as I understand, and a lot of talent to bring to the table to discuss these things. So in summary, the developer will come, obviously, with proposals. Developments are just usually, one other suggestion, better done in pieces. Why? Because the market has to absorb the real estate as it comes online. It might sound great to develop everything at once. It doesn't always work that way. So you do have enough land that you could probably bring it online over time. And in this case, it was a combination of very large high-end restaurants combined with smaller, the BurgerFis and the smaller retailers that were beach-oriented. But this relates back to that slide that we showed you, which is, do you really know the kinds of end uses that you're targeting, and do you know what those valuations are going to be? Also, like you, this city wanted a hotel. Now, your hotel, I know, has been discussed at the end of New York Ave. Who knows, where you end up really going to get a hotel, but having any kind of variation in the uses will only help you, because you're sending out a message to the total real estate market that you are open to development of all kinds. So I think when you do start to put your bids out, even if it's not a hotel per se on the site you're bidding, you are telling the world that you want a hotel in your city somewhere. And to summarize, this is the slide that I shared with you last time that was vitally important, since you do have a garage as part of your redevelopment. The garage on the left is just your utilitarian, I think it's from a college in Florida somewhere. And the one on the right is what we built. In this case, it was very important that the public sector investment didn't look like a public sector government job. And the threshold for this was, of course, more expensive. The sales alone were about $1 million. Not that all garages have to have $1 million worth of sales on it. This garage could afford it. But it is that concept of living up to your public sector side of what you expect the private sector to bring. We knew what that was. So we want to marry what you will do as the government with what you expect the private sector to do. And these are the kind of density and scales and developments that will start to get attracted to your city. What you're looking for, and this is in your backup, not for me to discuss tonight, but really what you're looking for, again, is that in-depth analysis of land that you own and what it means to the real estate market. Now, you aren't going to own all the land. So another thing we talked about last time, and that's what this slide is about, is making sure you also understand the private sector land ownership. Because you're going to put out a bid on your land, but you want to bring people to develop private land as well. So this plan really recognizes that that is part of your programming. It's not just a focus in on one particular parcel and off you go. Again, in summary, with the financial part of it, we talked about the strategy. Here's the finance, is how are you going to grow your tax increment and use that as your source to reinvest to get a cycle going of public sector investment that draws private sector investment. So that is, in summary, the real estate portion of your land acquisition. I know I went rather quickly, but I hope it was straightforward enough that as you start down this process of implementation, that you're comfortable that it's not overwhelming. It doesn't have to be overly complicated. There's just real important parts as the government of things that you want to be doing so that you're successful. The next part, and I'm going to hand this over to Adrian in a minute, is now you got to go out and tell your story. Once you obviously put it all together, you want to go to the International Council of Shopping Centers. You want to have your brochures. You want to have your marketing materials. We call them leasing packages. But it's really about making sure that as you tell this story about your investment, it's a long-term thing. So you want to have your story told in a way that's marketable, attractive, and exciting, and then people will want to come, invest on a long-term basis in your city. Adrian's going to take it from here. She will walk you through how the plan has the sources and the uses, and I've covered the land acquisition portion. There's 4 or 5 other sections. She'll walk you through those, and then we're open if you'd like to ask questions as we go, or if you want to regroup at the end. So if there's no further questions, then I'll ask Adrian to come up.
Comment?
We good?
Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm Adrian Esteban with RMA. And the slide that you have before you, as Kim said, the one part of this is the projects and the programs that we're recommending. The other part is the funding of those projects and programs. So what you'll see before you is our financing for this strategic plan. At the top, you'll have your sources, which are also known as your revenue. That includes your TIF, we call it TIF, but the tax increment revenue, everyone pretty much refers to it as TIF. Sometimes you'll have miscellaneous sources, like, rents or things like that. We are also suggesting in this plan that you consider CRA financing, especially for these bigger projects that will tend to increase the private investment as well, because they see the public investment is there first. On the bottom, you'll see the uses, which are your expenses. We separate it into different sections of operations, redevelopment area. What you'll see in front of you on this particular slide is just for the land acquisition in P3s. So like I said, we are recommending financing so that you would be able to fund a public-private partnership on one of your opportunity sites. But we're also suggesting funding for your marketing and promotional activities, as well as property acquisition, more so in the later years, only because you have limited funding in the first couple of years. The next section deals with density and housing. You have quite a bit of single-family in the downtown area of the CRA and a few multifamily properties, but having a diversity of uses, including townhomes or mixed use, and even accessory dwelling units, excuse me, in your single family, tends to lead to more rooftops, which then leads to more businesses in an area. One program that you all actually are going to be starting soon is the Paint, Plant, Pave program. And this is to really help spruce up some of the existing housing stock that you have in the area to improve the neighborhoods. So again, this is the financing page. We do think with relatively a small amount of funds for the Paint, Plant, Pave program, you can get that going, and then in the later years, create an infill program for some of the vacant properties that you do still have in the area that could have this diversity of housing, more with the mixed use or the townhome concepts. The next section deals with connectivity and public spaces. You all actually already have quite a few projects that are going on that deal with trying to create better streetscapes, wider sidewalks. With your phase 2 of your streetscape improvement on Pennsylvania Avenue, the city's looking at the 10th Street Complete Streets. There's the multi-use trail that's going to connect the CRA to the waterfront development, and even your county is looking at additional trails in the area. One of our recommendations, and this is actually in your plan too, not these particular renderings, but is to create what we call a complete street concept on US 192. That's having wider sidewalks, separated bike lanes, and more shade trees along there. So it's multimodal, meaning that there's a way for everyone to get to and from the area. Another suggestion that we have in this plan is to improve and beautify the alleyways. You have quite a few in your downtown district, so those can be improved through pavers, lighting, things of that nature. And then one of the biggest needs that we saw is a need for what we call our Civic Commons. That's a place where your community can gather. Usually there's some kind of feature, either a splash pad, or in this example, this is actually a water fountain that has a fire element to it too. So creating those attractions not only for activation, because more people on the street, have more eyes there, and it just makes community safer. But then also, as part of the activation, possibly including like kiosk or carts, so that you're driving economic development in those areas as well. And then the last thing we heard from you all the last time we were here is creating the last mile transportation. So typically this is through a trolley service or golf cart transit, and then your neighbors to the north actually in Lake Nona have the autonomous vehicles. But so people can get around downtown easily and not have to deal with the congestion that sometimes is on, well, I think you probably will say maybe more frequently in the rush hour time on 192. So this is the funding that we're suggesting. Again, we recommended the CRA have financing for the Civic Commons Plaza. This is about half of that budget that we're recommending. And then for the most part, you'll see the projects are funded towards the end of the 5-year period. Our next section deals with the special projects. So these are the projects that are happening around the CRA mostly. We know that you are looking at the lakefront and waterfront master plan and developing that. That'll tie nicely to your other projects that you have, including the medical arts campus, a portion of which is in the CRA, as well as your entertainment district that you already have. We also know that you're looking at expansion of your city hall, but we're also suggesting that you pay attention to those surrounding areas, again, maximizing your potential for the property that you do own. And then the other new project that we're suggesting for this section, it has to do with cultural arts. Cultural arts communities that have cultural arts tend to be more economically healthy. You do have the start of that in some of your existing businesses. I know there's a pottery business and a business that also provides art classes. But even having gallery space or performance art space can help your community. And just as an example, excuse me, in the same city that Kim had shown, that CRA actually recognized that there was no cultural arts in there at all. So what they did is they purchased a building that had been derelict since probably the 1960s. They renovated it, not only the exterior, but the interior, created maker spaces and gallery spaces. Then they did that to another building in one of the other CRA districts. And from there, the city was able to build on that reputation. They actually decided to build their own cultural arts center. And from there, the reputation of that city just grew and grew and grew, along with the cultural arts offerings. So here we're suggesting about $20,000 each year, starting in 2023, towards those efforts. So for downtown redevelopment, one of the things that we're suggesting here is a green market or a farmer's market. We know you have your monthly night event, which is a great, I heard is a great success. But green markets also, create that opportunity to grow businesses from, your tents and your vendors into brick and mortar places. So it's just another opportunity to create the economic development incentive. Attracting a hotel, we know, is another one of your priorities, especially with hotel feasibility, saying that you all do need it. And then establishment of historic preservation grants. You already have your historic preservation district designated, so that would just be the funding behind it, so that you could have grants available for businesses and properties that want to renovate. And then our last section deals with branding, marketing, and communications. So this is the way that you're explaining the CRA through typically visuals. This could be, your banners on your light poles that show the images that you're trying to convey to the area, and then that is expressed typically in other collateral materials that you have. There's also opportunity for additional wayfinding signage and then gateway markers to let people know that they're in the downtown area. Another effective tool that we found is making sure you're getting your message out about the CRA, the great work that the CRA is doing, and the projects that are coming up. This can be anything from your direct communications through mail, making sure your website is up to date and meeting the requirements of the CRA statute, as well as getting your message out through social media. And then the last thing that we're suggesting here is to increase your art in public places. You already have the start with your great historic mural program, but that could be even increased for more artistic endeavors and sculptures and things of that nature, and then showcasing it and mapping it out so you're really creating a destination in your downtown. And then for the last thing we have here, it's just the continuation of the existing events that you have, the culinary bike tour and the monthly market, and other opportunities for economic development. So this slide, I'm going to actually go to the next slide. So this is your total budget that you're looking at here. You'll see, again, on the top, your sources, including your revenues. And then on the bottom half, you'll see your uses and expenditures. The very left column is the column that has the total amount. The column just to the right of that is what we're recommending for the conceptual CRA financing. You'll see it says $4 million there. And that is broken down into the garage, a P3 opportunity site, and the Civic Commons Plaza. The next column is your already approved fiscal year 22 budget. And then the columns after that are for the subsequent years during this 5-year period. So on the bottom, you'll see how we separated those expenditures into operations, debt service, because that's to pay back that loan, and then the redevelopment area investment, which you'll see where bulk of the funding is located. And then lastly, you have a reserve account, but again, we're recommending that you put all your money into your redevelopment projects and programs that are being created through this plan. The last component of this plan is the implementation matrix. As Kim mentioned, this is your guide of what's happening when. And the beauty of this too is that you can also change your priorities and decide, if some projects need to happen sooner or later. It does give you the flexibility to change that. And with that, I'll end the presentation and we'll take any questions you may have.
Have any questions or comments from the council, board? I don't think we have any questions. We certainly appreciate all the information that you have certainly dug up and shared with us today. It has been very informative. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilmember Matheny may
Sorry,
have a question.
I had to go back. So I guess this question was maybe more for internet, but it was great information like we had last time, but how do we move forward? Like, what's our next steps? Like, how do we identify a project, or, what do we need to do to start the wheels in motion?
So now that, and if the CRA board is in agreement with the plan, and I'd have to defer to the city attorney whether or not it needs official adoption, but if the board is in agreement with it, then now we as staff would move forward. Moving forward with means we need to now identify the alternative financing. We also need to identify what our priority projects are going to be. As our consultant mentioned, that we are in the process of drafting an RFP for the lot right behind the hotel, and we're working with RMA through the continuing services contract to draft it in such a language that we attract the appropriate type of developer.
When you say the lot behind the hotel, is that the one south of 10th Street you're talking about?
The one 10th and, is it Michigan? Massachusetts, sorry.
But is that not still potentially in play with, we haven't decided exactly where the parking garage is going to go, and, there were some conversations about where, I guess I'm just wondering, is it premature to put this out on the street when we still have questions in the air about the parking garage?
So it's
Or are you talking about a parking garage? But you're saying, you didn't mention parking garage, so I'm assuming you're talking about something else.
So we were looking at doing a mixed-use project that included the parking as part of it. So it's my understanding that the parking garage that was originally presented 2 meetings ago or so was originally for another site. It was right next door to it. And so we went back as staff and re-reviewed and said, okay, well, maybe it's more advantageous to have it directly behind the hotel, still giving the number of parking spaces that we need, but in order to be able to pay for it, because it'll be quite substantial, we may need to do a public-private partnership.
So is maybe I'm getting too far afield, but the parking garage is wholly on that dirt lot? Because I thought if we moved it south of 10th Street, it would hit buildings too that have businesses in them.
No, it's not our intention at this point to move it any further than just that lot, but that's part of our due diligence as staff.
Okay.
We have to make sure that it makes sense.
Okay, yeah, because what was presented was a huge footprint that was north of 10th Street. And then I know we talked about south of 10th Street, but I didn't know that the footprint could shrink to that, city-owned parcel.
So potentially so. Like I said, the way we were drafting it, we wanted to find a developer that can help offset some of those costs, but we also need to do a financial analysis to make sure that, number one, we can sustain it over time, but number two, that we have the appropriate number of spaces based on increased development.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, do we need to adopt it or do something?
I don't know, Antoinette, I think it's a good idea that they adopt the plan as presented. There's obviously a lot more that has to be done. You're gonna see it in all kinds of different iterations or further tasks, but I think right now we'd like to have the plan adopted.
Are there any other questions or discussion regarding this plan that's been presented? Member Trace.
Thank you. Great plan. I like it when we just map a whole bunch of stuff out, but my worry is this is kind of inch deep and a mile wide of, I don't know if we can get any of these projects actually done with the amount of financing we put in some of them, of finishing out. I mean, we had a streetscape plan that kind of had a whole bunch more streets, and I don't think we're able to, based on the bids that came back on Pennsylvania, I don't even know if we have enough money. Like, we have to move money around to get that to work. I don't see how we can get a parking garage done for $1 million. Just I don't know if this is like enough to get everything done.
Thank you, Councilmember. One thing that I suggest is when you are looking at what's supposed to happen up front, and let's talk about the garage. You can't build a garage for $1 million. You can build parking spaces. Let's assume a parking space is 20,000 a space, 25 depending on construction. Here's where the sharp pencil has to come out. As you put this bid out, and that's why I took that time initially to go really deep like that, this is where you have to really start to analyze exactly how many spaces can we afford with the money we have. Do we want to issue a bond to get a few million more? If we do, where are we going to put that money strategically to draw more private sector money to come in here? So it's not really so much an inch deep and a mile wide as much as it is every single one of those dollar amounts that's in there has to be analyzed and then either put together through a P3, like I talked about in the beginning, that you know that those monies will be spent on a specific amount of something, garage spaces, whatever, but it's got to bring in private sector investment. That's where the next heavy lifting is. Your second problem might be we threw a lot of stuff out here tonight because we put everything out. It's a 5-year plan. You don't want to be changing course too often, and things happen over time. Your challenge really will be resources because you only have so much staff. So I don't know as much you're going to have a financial problem as much as you have to make sure that you have the staff resources and or assistance to implement the things. But my suggestion is don't get too caught up in how much is showing up in that plan. Analyze each one of these initiatives so deeply that when you launch it, you know it will be successful, which is how I started the presentation on the land acquisition / analysis / getting those private guys to the table. Does that help answer your question?
It does, but I don't think any of these projects actually get done with the way this is presented. And sometimes that gives the false direction to staff that, okay, implement this plan, but it can't actually get done the way it's presented.
I believe it can. I think what will happen is as you start to delve into them, in particular your land acquisition, you don't have enough to go out and build a 600-space garage by yourself and get it to cash flow. But that's not what you're going to do in phase one. What you would do is analyze with the money you do have and with the money you may consider borrowing to increase that amount, what kind of a public-private partnership are you going to enter into? And it's drafting that bid document to get you to where you need to go. Right now you have enough money to build 50 parking spaces. Do you really just go with 50, or do we twist and turn those monies a little bit based on what we think the private sector will do to add more? And if so, how do we realign that either with a bond issue or some other issue? So we wouldn't have written this if we didn't think you could do it, but you will see that it will morph over time depending on whether you go through that analysis and do it with thought and analysis as opposed to just putting a bid out there. If you put a bid out and say I have $1 million, you're right, you won't get there.
Okay, so if we're going to put something out there and it's going to be a P3, then that P3 partner has to make money on whatever it is, right?
Correct.
So, and the two things we'll be able to put into it are land that we might already have around.
Which is a value.
Which is a value, and let's call it $2 million an acre, not that we have a bunch of big parcels around.
Yep.
And then also financing ability at a better rate than they might be able to do themselves.
Correct. You get tax-exempt bonds that are cheaper than taxable.
Does that, like, is it easy to do a quick analysis of, is that enough to make it happen?
It's what I started this presentation with. It's a complex analysis, but it's what in conversations with your staff that we've had, which is that RFP that you put out, it's imperative that you are sure that the private sector can cash flow. So you have to understand how to analyze your land value versus what you're going to put in and your ask in terms of public spaces. You've got to be realistic. You don't have enough for 200 spaces. $1 million will not buy you 200 parking spaces. Who says you need 200 parking spaces there? Is there a shared parking opportunity? Probably. So those are the steps when you're drafting this RFP that need to take what you currently have and get that ball rolling. And you'd be surprised how much the private sector is dying to engage with you. They just need to know what your public sector commitment is. And then they will follow that based on how you draft that RFP.
But the dollars and cents still have to make sense.
Yes, they do.
For them.
Yes, they do. And we would suggest you don't issue the RFP unless you're fairly certain they do.
Okay. And then we did focus a lot in downtown, which is good, but were there any other funding strategies other than the infill and paint, plant, pave that kind of go in other areas?
As far as revenue coming in?
Or just us implementing funds into other areas of the CRA?
Well, because you are limited, what we normally suggest when a city has limited funds, and the CRA that we showed you up there, that we used that case study from, they had, I think, 1.5 million in TIF when we started. They are upwards now of 5, and that's only in 9 years. So if you target your money correctly and very effectively to bring the private sector in, and don't spread your money too far out, focus on almost every dollar you spend should attract private sector money. So the way we have front-loaded this is a bit of a carrot and a stick, because we don't have enough to go out and build this big garage. You don't need that, is to really make sure that we're putting the funds where we believe you will attract private sector investment. Things like culture and those quality of life things are important, but you'll notice there's not huge dollar amounts applied to those. There's enough that you can send a message. There's enough that you can start to form that programming and have it grow. You have to start, though.
On an investment, what's just a good ballpark private to public funds to just say something's successful?
That's so specific to every site, every development. There's a lot of private money on the market right now, a tremendous amount of money out there. They're looking for a place to put it. You have all the assets to bring them here. You have a good council, you're committed, you want to do something. You do have the structure of a CRA. You have an opportunity zone, which those aren't overly busy right now, but you have the CRA itself. Private guys that are active right now in residential development, and those kind of developers aren't going to look at what's your share, what's mine. They're going to look what you asked first, and you were right. Can I make money? Can it cash flow? So when we do those kind of analysis, we don't necessarily look how much do we have to put in. We say how do we get them to come, and what will they build?
Okay.
Ms. Miller?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to also address to the City Council that this plan does assume that we would be looking to acquire additional debt in order to implement this plan. I just want to make sure that was clear.
Councilmember Davis?
Yes, actually, that was a question I was thinking. Have we done any analysis on how much additional debt the city can take on in total, and then looked at what portions of that we're going to have to allocate to water, sewer, all the other potential items that the growth is going to require the city to do, so that we can come out to some kind of a number of what reasonably might be left for debt that could be used for this?
I would ask for our Finance Director, Ms. Collazo, to also address the debt.
Wendy Collazo, Finance Director. In working with RMA, we lightly touched on this. I just wanted to make sure that that point was very clear. You must remember that debt is about capacity, right? What we should. There is no real rule or law that says this is how much you should, but it is our responsibility fiscally to make sure that we are at a place where we don't strain the funds that we have. And cash flow is correct to be put on this, but the forefront is really timing of cash flow, because you're throwing something out to invest at a certain rate with a level to make those payments with a changing economy, okay? And we have to take all that in play to hopefully attract and then eventually get to positive cash flow, right? So just, I wanted you to be aware of that. Is there a number? We have $47 million in debt all the way up to 2041. We have a lot of other things circulating. 32 million of that is water and utilities. And we have other projects going on as well. Just in the utility side, you're looking at a call about 145 million over 5. There's different funds and sections, but like I said, to be clear, there is no really, I do an extra formula for you all to keep us at a 10% capacity to make payments, and whatever we have existing. They've calculated the raw, numbers. And we're in agreement that this could happen, and it's possible, but it is a big ask, especially with the TIF, as they call it. Things can change, and that is the tax base going to change. So we're always going to be cautious and look at them. I think you'll have another stab at it when projects come through. But, just wanted you to be aware that it calls upon that. They feel good about it, we feel okay about it, but there are changing factors that may always affect it, so wanted just to be clear on that, so everybody, has that information.
Right, and I think everybody can agree that some point in the future, there's going to be a downturn. Is it this year, next year, 5 years, who knows? But with commercial not having that same protection for the Save Our Homes that residential has, the tax values in this section could drop virtually overnight, the assessed value. So the revenue on that TIF funding could go away in the blink of an eye. And because it's only recently come into, the city share of it has only recently come into play anyway.
I think it's very fair to say that. I also think it's fair to note that we hope that the turn of the economy, we're tracking it to where it wouldn't be such a downturn, especially when it comes to home values, right? We're seeing the bell turn, and what's going to start happening is priority of bills, right? And we're starting to see people are having difficulty paying those mortgage bills, right? What does that mean to us? Economically, I track that, and we're maybe a low to moderate 2023 recession. Small case, but that could change at any moment. I don't think it's going to spike, but we got to consider it.
And every time, I've been in the development business since I was 19, which is unfortunately a very long time ago.
Yes, sir.
And
I didn't
every
say that in
time
agreement.
we're in this type of a situation, I always hear Florida's recession-proof, Florida's isolated, it's not going to be a big downturn. It always is. In these, I don't know how people afford the houses today. We've stopped building. In the late 70s, I would have sold a 1,700 square foot house for $59,000 or $69,900. That house today would be $350-ish. People's income is not proportionally accelerated the same as the prices. So the only way they're affording them today, for the most part, at least the people we were selling to, is having multi-generational occupancy of those houses. It's not where 40 years ago you'd have had a retiree move here and give us maybe half of their money to buy a house, put the other half in savings, or you'd have a young couple coming up and could afford it. Today, that doesn't happen for the most part. They're struggling to figure out how to buy these houses, and the slightest little glitch is going to destroy them.
Yes, sir, I agree, and I think, you've been in the business, and many people here on the council, everybody's experienced, have different takes on it. Inflation is at 7.7% with a 2.2% every month over month right now. So, steel went up, 150%, concrete, right? So we got to take those factors into consideration. I just didn't want to present it as a negative because they have done the analysis that puts us in a good spot. We agree with that the investment has to happen. It's just a matter of you all knowing that that investment involves grabbing some debt that we will protect to make sure that it is reasonable for what we could do to pay the bill. Can we pay that mortgage payment on it? Even with downturn, because the bills keep coming no matter what. So that's all I wanted to make sure is that they've made a fair assessment. We're not, but that debt is required in order. We can't do it without it, and I think that lays to Member Trace's comment that where we sit right now, yep, you're right, we can't do it. We're going to need some leverage, and I just want you to make aware of what that involves, and have it in your forefront when you make this decision and adopt.
Yeah. I think we just have too many competing demands for that debt, is my fear.
It's an art form, sir.
Member Matheny.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Colazo. When you were giving your update, it made me think, I think it was Member Askew who had asked the question a few meetings ago about approaching the county to see if we could extend the expiration of the CRA due to trying to use it as a bonding, financial mechanism. Have we reached out to the county about that?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. That was a few meetings ago. I think you brought that up.
Do we have any other discussion or questions? Adopting the study doesn't mean we're going to automatically go out and finance everything immediately and do it also, but we do need to adopt.
And you're adopting basically a plan, and as you know, the
plan.
Sierra has in place all kinds. So basically, it's just the envelope of what you could do, but I think we want that in place. That will give the staff the ability to start working a little better, a little bit more particular in certain things.
Certainly gives us some direction.
Yes.
Any other discussion? Could I have a motion for the adoption?
So moved.
I'll give it a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
And we have one opposition and 1, 2, 3,
6-1.
and 6-4. Thank you.
For it, right?
Yes, not the number 4.
Okay. Brings us to staff reports.
There we go. Bear with me 1 second. I'm going to make an attempt to explain this one, but Finance Director is here just in case. So it's my understanding that during the reconciliation of last fiscal year's budget, it was realized that there was $331,595 more than the original resolution had allocated for that fund balance. And so this amendment is basically taking that additional $331,000 and adding it to the parking garage, but we have to have an amendment to that resolution in order to do so. That's it.
Any questions? Mr. Davis?
Can we remind me exactly what we did with the St. Cloud Hotel last meeting? And how does this, is this what we approved last time, or?
Yes, the only difference is there's an additional $331,000 to the downtown parking garage line item.
Okay. So the St. Cloud Hotel remains essentially unchanged?
Correct.
Mr. Manzares?
And I was just going to follow up with Mr. Davis's question, but I think he got his answer.
Thank you. Do we have any other discussion? Could I have a motion that we approve this amendment?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And it so carries unanimously.
Wendy Collazo, Finance Director. This is the presentation of your October through December actual expenditure financial statements, unaudited. The first tab here you see is, of course, your revenue and/or other sources. Effective during this quarter, we received our TIF amount of $1.1 million from Osceola County, as you can see there, and we are fully appropriated with that. Our operating interest, actual performance at $1,498 with a $10,000 expected revenue in by the end of the year. So we still have that deficit to fill, which we feel confident will go over. Interfund transfers, this is the monthly transfer that normally happens at an interval of $82,299. We are 3 months in, first quarter, so as you see that interval going through with $496,000 left in interfund transfers to post by the end of the year. Your total actual performance for the CRA from October through December, 1.1. Let's round that to $1.2 million this year, with a budgeted amount for the full year of $1.7 million, and we are on track and trending towards being fully revenued as we expect and budgeted. Second and final portion for the balance of the revenue, of course, come the expenditures and any other uses we have. Again, the budget is balanced at $1.7 million of expected budgeted expenses between personnel, operating capital, and any other uses. We had a total of $92,845 expended. 1,565 was through operating and personnel. 35,701 in operating, 2,579 in capital and/or grants and aids, and no other uses during this quarter were used, with that a total expended amount of $92,845. We still have a unexpended balance of $1.6 million, and expected performance puts us always at about an 80-20 split from budget, so we expect to expend about 80%. That is your financials for October through December, actual performance to budget to fiscal year 21-22, if you have any questions.
Do you have any questions? Could I entertain, Member Davis again? Sorry.
Can we go back to the slide a minute for the income, please?
Yes, sir.
Just a really quick question. Operating interest is on the available balances. What interest rate do you have that calculated on?
Well, normally right now, we have we've been back and forth between the 1.2 to almost 2.9 that we've gotten. It's increasing because of our partnerships, but we actually had a credit that posted here previous financials, so we're at about a 2.9 right now on the cash. And that is also because of the partnerships we have with some of the revolving cash that we have. We're getting better points than anybody around right now. We're getting a point on those versus 0.6 with the market sitting right now.
What's the maturity on those funds? What kind of time frame? Are they a mixture or are they not?
I have a mixture of them. Most of them, we diversified them a little bit better to have 2-year, 10-year, 5-year, 10-year, and anything above kind of mortgage rate ones. We're fully diversified in those about almost equally. When we brought that on, we were too diversified on long-term, so we changed that a bit.
Okay, so which kind of comes up to my question is, how exposed are we for an interest rate increase? If interest rates were to jump significantly, how much of a discount are we going to have to recognize on our funds that we have invested to bring into like a mark-to-market type of a situation?
We expect to, we're coming up and we were able to secure a 1-point interest rate return that nobody else had based on our agreements that were going to be ending in the following one more year. We have a 3-year term. We're trying to negotiate and see if they would give us the next term at 1 point, but we're also watching the market because it is trending up and we don't want to be on so we will have those discussions at that point, but we're trying to mitigate that because we have been since we knew that the agreements were coming abroad. So throughout the entire emphasis of COVID, the main big, we were getting more points than anybody in gains, realized more than anybody around in the market. When everybody, like I said, it dropped to 0.6, we're still at 1 point. And I fight with the broker every single day.
Is the city available to do like repurchase agreements overnight on excess cash, generally speaking, or is that like really not a market nowadays?
No, sir, just because of the our policy puts us in a kind of area to be more conservative and not have those tools and bullets. And we went with our investing company, which puts us more protected to make sure that we are long-term and not kind of can gamble, those things and play with them a little bit more. Vice versa, right? Because it could be a good thing on a positive, but I really don't like to have those controls to just play with other people's money per se. We like to keep it steady and consistent. That's what's been proven throughout the years, and fund balance proves that we've made those earnings well with the pooled cash.
Do we have any other discussion? Could I have a motion that we adopt the report as presented?
So moved.
Second.
And we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And it so carries. This time we'll have any member updates. Member Davis?
Nothing tonight, Your Honor.
Member Lodi?
Nothing tonight.
Trace?
So they did mention in that little update or the 5-year plan of the ADUs, accessory dwelling units, and that's something that's kind of stalled. Is that something we can keep pushing along? It's more of a planning and zoning question, but I think that would be really beneficial for the CRA and kind of the city as a whole to get some accessory dwelling units on the ground. The info lots that they brought up, some of those other items are city council items, but I think a lot of those are some simple things that we can get to where we can get public or private investment in there without having to put a lot of public investment in. So,
All right. Member Askew?
Can we look into seeing if we can push the CRA out a little bit farther with the county and have that conversation again, or start that conversation?
I have written 2 notes so far, the accessory dwelling unit ordinance and reach out to the county regarding the extension of the CRA expiration. And the city manager may have already reached out to the county. Unfortunately, I didn't know it was going to come up tonight, so I didn't have the opportunity to ask him.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Mazzini.
Thank you. Member Irvin?
Nothing for me, Mayor.
Member Matheny?
I don't have anything.
Member Ms. Miller, you have anything?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Mr. Mr. Manzares?
We're good here in the end.
Okay. At this time, do we have anyone in the audience? Come right ahead.
So sorry, I thought this was the time to add a reminder about our economic summit that's coming up February the 17th. Since we're talking about the 5-year plan and redevelopment and how to get new businesses into the area. It is an all-day event. It is virtual. It is 28 panelists in different specialties, and we are still taking registrations for anyone who's interested.
Thank you. We'll help get that word out. Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the board at this time? Please step forward and give us your name.
Glenn Harris, 701 13th Street.
Hi, Glenn.
Good evening, Board. I'm here tonight with, I don't want to say concerns, but I guess questions and looking for solutions. So we've applied for the grant application months ago, about 5 months ago. And unfortunately, there were some staffing issues and some things, and then there was technical difficulties over the last 4 or 5 weeks. I don't know if the council's aware of them, but unfortunately, staff didn't receive our emails, not of their fault, just technical glitches. And it's okay. It happens in our world today. But the issue that we're having is that because the project has taken 4 or 5 months at no one's fault, however, building supplies go up. I mean, we're at about a 15% increase over these 4 or 5 months. Now, we come to the CRA and we say, hey, well, look at these increases. And the answer, which is a good answer and the right answer, is, well, you got to redo your application and start from scratch. Well, that obviously is just not possible for us. Our building is located on the corner of 13th Street and Michigan Avenue. We bought the building on the good faith that we were going to be able to apply for grants to fix the building. Now, we're a law firm, so imagine for yourself, you pull up to your law firm, and that's the condition of the building. It's concerning, and we're just trying to get it fixed. Now, we're ready to get it fixed. The city was so gracious today, actually, did a great job of getting us the first meeting they could on Monday. Like, it was great, you know, exactly what we want. Our question is twofold. One, the CRA grant process, after it's approved by the city board, not this board, the board underneath it, and we come before this board again, if it's approved, can we start construction immediately? Or are there other other boards and other processes that we have to go through? Or can we start immediately? And the second question, to piggyback off that, is there anything inside of our city code that would allow this board to grant us any type of variance or a special meeting that we could hold to where this process can move along and not wait another month? And I'll leave that to the board.
Mr. Manzares, can you help us on some of that? I think we're pretty limited on what we can do.
You are, this CRA, Anthony, can always call a special meeting. You have the authority to do that whenever you can. The issue with regard to the grant and when the construction can start, this is the last step for approval of the grant. So when it comes back here, if it's approved, it's ready to go. I can't give you an answer as to whether construction could start right away without understanding the grant and the grant approvals that would be presented and what conditions might be placed on the grant before it can be basically implemented. But to answer the question, you're the last step, so it doesn't have to go anywhere else after it comes back to you.
So I guess my question to the board would be, is there a possibility of a special meeting to be held in the next week or two after I've met with him, if it's approved through the lower board, if it is, that we could come back and wrap this up?
Well, I would certainly be amenable to that if the rest of the council would be. Councilmember Trace, you had your...
And you say 1 month. That's our next meeting.
That's right.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm personally fine with anytime we have a council meeting, having it 15 minutes before that.
Right.
You know, these are the only two that won't be there, but I mean, if you guys are fine with that. One of the things that the last 5-year plan didn't have in it anymore is the BSIG funds, right? So this is it. Part of my issue with that strategy is it takes so long, and you can't do anything. You can't expend any of those funds until you actually get fully approved, and you have to get architects involved, and you have to do a whole bunch of stuff. So it's one of those, I like it as a strategy. It's just one of those implementation through the process is just something that is troublesome. And you guys dealt with extra issues here, but it's just, but I am perfectly fine any meeting we have, if we want to do it before it.
Member Miller? Ms. Miller?
Thank you, Mayor. Staff was already discussing the potential request to have a special meeting the first Thursday in March, which would be March 3rd, which I believe may assist the situation, because we were already planning on requesting that.
That would be great, and we would gladly accept and, the offer. However, I do know that we do have a city council meeting coming up next week, correct? I think I'm correct. I could be wrong.
Correct.
And I don't know if the city will be, under us, will be ready, but we are meeting on Monday with everyone to get this approved, and everything is complete in my application. So I don't know if the city can speak to
I
that.
certainly understand your haste. That'd be up to the city if they had it ready or not.
I just don't think they can get that through the system in time.
Yeah, it's
That would be-
I don't have a regular meeting on the 3rd on my calendar.
We were working on potentially calling it on March 3rd, so we can just go ahead right now and say we're going to hold it on March 3rd.
Yeah, I just don't want to drag staff out. I mean, if a bunch of the staff has to be here normally on, what's the February 24th meeting, I don't want to have a whole extra meeting just for that, unless we were planning on having a workshop or something on the 3rd anyway.
We're planning on it. We just weren't sure if we were going to be ready. We were hoping to call and request a meeting for March 3rd.
Not
to be
CRA.
vague.
Oh, but, sorry, what, for a council meeting?
CRA.
I don't want to have just the only thing we're going to have is one item on the agenda for that meeting. I'd rather it before a council meeting or some other meeting we have.
Well, I think what Mrs. Miller is suggesting to you, prior to this discussion, the staff was already considering having a CRA meeting on March 3rd to talk about additional items.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay.
Right.
So this could be added,
Okay.
staff could move forward and
Yeah,
make sure it's on that agenda.
I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I support anything we can do to help. I know they've been having some challenges with it, and I'm sure staffing changes didn't help, and, every other thing. The water main got broken this week. Everything.
We'll certainly do everything we can if staff, whatever they can do as far as bringing stuff forward, we'll certainly do it to accommodate as quickly as we can. But it looks like you may be looking at 3rd
Okay.
to get the work done.
So, so moving forward, I guess our attempted plan, tentatively, is to meet March the 3rd. And at what point does the city need to have, under the board, need to have everything in order for us to call that meeting? Or are they setting it now for March the 3rd?
Antoinette?
Well, if the question, right now you don't have a meeting set for March the 3rd. So if you want a meeting on March the 3rd, this committee can certainly call it right now and tell us you want to have a meeting on March 3rd.
Well, I think what Mr. Trace is saying is, can't we have it on the 24th before our council meeting? Like, whatever you were planning to try to do, plus whatever, he needs to get done. I'm with Mr. Trace. I'd rather not have an extra day that we have to hustle to get it over here, if it could go at the same, obviously before the council meeting.
If it could be done on the 24th, it'd be up to the staff.
Good evening again. We haven't actually formally met. I think we were doing a lot of emails and back and forth. But I wanted to offer a possible alternative, just in case the meeting that we have next week, which includes many staff persons as part of the whole development review process, and if it comes out that unfortunately the scope needs more intensive review, and therefore it will not be available at the time for this March 3rd meeting. The other alternative, I thought, is that he may be eligible for other types of grants. Remember, we still have our CDBG grant, and we also have our COVID assistance grants. Both of those cumulatively, will be about $30,000. Now, those are for working capital, but if he uses those funds towards his working capital, that hopefully can offset and he can use his other funds to do the improvements, that is a possible solution. I just thought I'd bring that to the front. That's something we can discuss with him in more detail of what the requirements are, but it's a much faster process.
Well, we'd certainly appreciate you doing everything that you can to help accommodate that and move it along as fast as possible.
Thank you. We'll talk on Monday. So, I mean, I guess I will leave it with, I am available on February 24th tentatively, if we are moving in that. I don't know about the council, but I'll leave that to you guys. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Harris.
Thank you.
Does anyone else like to speak during the public forum? If not, that brings us to our information section.
Mr. Mayor.
Are you wanting to say something, sir? Risotto? Mateo? You won't take as long as you did last time, will you?
I will not.
Thanks, sir.
I will not. Well, last time I did take a little long, and last time I wasn't ready. I didn't have everything together. I did work on putting everything together, and I did put everything together. And I thought I was going to be in this meeting today to present everything to you, and I'm not. And I would like to be on the next meeting to present everything to you.
You talk about the next CRA meeting?
Yes.
You see that later right there. She'll have you work that out.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Once again, we're at our information section. Our next CRA meeting is now scheduled for Thursday, April 7th, 2022. With that, there's no other items on our agenda. We will be adjourned from this CRA meeting. Please hang around for a ESD meeting.